What happens when one of cinema's most methodical, intensely prepared actors walks onto a morning show expecting a professional conversation and instead encounters a host who has done zero research, fabricated controversies, and prepared nothing but tabloid ambush questions? What happens when Tom Hardy, the man known for disappearing into roles with frightening commitment, the actor who transforms his entire body and psyche for his craft, sits down with George Stephanopoulos and discovers within 60 seconds that he's been lured onto Good Morning America under completely false pretenses? This isn't just another uncomfortable celebrity interview. This isn't another moment of media tension that gets smoothed over with apologies and commercial breaks. This is the story of how George Stephanopoulos attempted to create a viral controversy by attacking Tom Hardy's professional methods with accusations he couldn't back up, questions he couldn't support, and research he simply hadn't done. And how Hardy, with the precision of a surgeon and the fury of someone whose integrity has been questioned without evidence, systematically dismantled not just Stephanopoulos, but the entire apparatus of shallow, lazy morning television journalism. By the time security was called and Hardy walked off that set, the entire world would witness what happens when manufactured controversy meets actual accountability, when tabloid ambush meets genuine preparation, and when a host who thought he could play hardball discovers he's brought empty accusations to a battle of facts. The morning began with typical Good Morning America energy, bright lighting, cheerful music, the carefully orchestrated chaos of live television production. Tom Hardy was scheduled to appear at 5 a.m. Pacific Time, 8 a.m. Eastern, during the show's prime viewership window. He had flown in from London the previous evening to promote his latest film, a psychological thriller that had critics already whispering about awards season. The studio buzzed with anticipation. Tom Hardy appearances were always interesting, always compelling, always authentic in an industry drowning in manufactured personas. Hardy arrived at the ABC studios in New York looking exactly like himself, understated, unpretentious, real. He wore a simple black jacket over a dark shirt, nothing flashy or attention-seeking. His Birmingham accent was as authentic as always, his demeanor calm and focused. He greeted crew members with genuine friendliness, asked a camera operator about her equipment, chatted briefly with a production assistant about coffee preferences. This was Hardy being Hardy. Present, professional, treating everyone with the same respect regardless of their position. What Hardy didn't know what he had, absolutely no way of anticipating, was that George Stephanopoulos and his production team had spent the previous afternoon preparing what they believed would be a hard-hitting interview. Not questions about his film, not inquiries about his craft or his process, but an ambush focused on manufactured controversy about method acting and mental health topics they had researched through gossip sites and secondhand summaries rather than actual interviews or expert opinions. In their minds, they were planning television gold, a confrontation that would go viral, clips that would dominate social media, a moment that would position Stephanopoulos as a journalist, unafraid to ask tough questions. What they had actually prepared was a disaster built on laziness, assumptions, and fundamental journalistic malpractice. The view set was bathed in its familiar bright morning lighting as Hardy was led to the guest chair across from Stephanopoulos. The studio audience applauded warmly as he took his seat, clearly excited to have such a respected actor on the show. Stephanopoulos sat across from him with that practiced television smile, the expression that morning show hosts perfect over years of interviews, designed to project warmth while maintaining professional distance. "Tom, thanks for joining us this morning," Stephanopoulos began, his voice carrying false brightness. "Your new film is getting incredible reviews, but I want to talk about something else first." Hardy shifted slightly in his chair, and those watching closely could see the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes focused more intently, the subtle shift from relaxed guest to alert subject. Something in Stephanopoulos' tone had triggered warning bells. "Sure, George," Hardy replied, his Birmingham accent warm but his voice carrying a note of caution. "What's on your mind?" Stephanopoulos leaned forward with the confidence of someone who believes they're holding winning cards. "Well, there's been some controversy surrounding your comments about method acting and mental health. Some critics are saying you've been irresponsible in how you approach your craft." The camera caught Hardy's expression change immediately, not dramatically, not with obvious anger, but with something more controlled and far more dangerous. His eyes narrowed fractionally, his posture straightened, and anyone who knew his work, who had seen him in interviews over the years, would have recognized that look. Tom Hardy processing betrayal, calculating response, preparing to engage. Irresponsible, Hardy repeated, his voice calm but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut glass. That's an interesting word choice, George. Care to elaborate on exactly what you mean by that? Stephanopoulos, clearly thinking he had the upper hand, pressed forward with increased confidence. Several mental health advocates have criticized your recent interviews where you discussed diving deep into dark psychological spaces for your roles. They're saying you're glamorizing dangerous behavior. So my question to you is, do you agree with them? Hardy's Birmingham accent became slightly more pronounced, a tell that anyone who knew him would recognize as his temperature rising. And you agree with them? He asked quietly. Is that what you're saying, George? I'm asking the questions here, Tom, Stephanopoulos replied, with the kind of casual dismissiveness that immediately establishes power dynamics in television interviews. What do you say to parents who might be concerned about young actors following your example? There was a pause not long by normal conversation standards, but an eternity in the compressed time of live television. Hardy stared directly at Stephanopoulos with an intensity that made several crew members visibly uncomfortable. The studio audience fell completely silent, sensing with that primal instinct humans have that something was about to go very, very wrong. Parents should be concerned. Hardy finally responded, his voice dangerously quiet. About morning show hosts who do zero research before ambushing their guests with loaded questions based on secondhand gossip and fabricated controversies. Stephanopoulos' practiced smile faltered for just a moment, the first crack in his professional facade. Tom, I don't think that's fair, he said, trying to maintain control. We're just trying to have an honest conversation here. Honest? Hardy let out a short laugh completely devoid of humor. George, mate, if you wanted an honest conversation, you would have mentioned this line of questioning to my publicist when you booked me. You would have done your homework, actual research, not reading talking points someone else compiled from gossip sites. But that's not what this is it? This is an ambush designed to create a viral moment. The shift in energy was palpable. This wasn't going according to Stephanopoulos' plan at all. Hardy wasn't defensive, wasn't flustered, he was counterattacking with surgical precision. I think our viewers deserve to hear your response to these legitimate concerns, Stephanopoulos tried, falling back on the shield of legitimate journalism. Your viewers, Hardy replied, his voice still controlled but gaining force, deserve better than this tabloid garbage masquerading as morning television journalism. Tell me, George, when was the last time you actually researched method acting? When did you speak to actual mental health professionals about the therapeutic benefits of exploring difficult emotions in a controlled professional environment with trained support? Stephanopoulos was visibly rattled now, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Tom, I think you're being defensive here. Defensive? Hardy repeated, and now there was genuine disbelief in his voice. George, I came here at 5 o'clock in the bloody morning to talk about a film I'm passionate about, a project I've poured months of my life into. Instead, you're trying to create a gotcha moment based on quotes you've taken completely out of context if they even exist at all. That's not defensive. That's called having professional standards. Well, the quotes speak for themselves, Stephanopoulos said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Do they? Hardy leaned forward slightly, his entire focus now laser-targeted on Stephanopoulos. Because I'd love to hear which specific quotes you're referring to. Can you cite them for me? Word for word, publication, journalist's name, context. The silence that followed was excruciating. Stephanopoulos glanced down at his notes, then back at Hardy, then at his notes again. You could see the panic beginning to creep into his expression, the realization that he was being held accountable for claims he couldn't support. Well, there have been several interviews where you've discussed your intense preparation methods, he offered weakly. Several interviews, Hardy repeated slowly, deliberately, letting the vagueness hang in the air like an indictment. But you can't quote a single one specifically, can you? You can't tell me which publication, which journalist, which exact words I used that you find so problematic. Tom, I think we're getting off track here. No, George. Hardy's voice carried absolute certainty now. I think we're getting right on track. You've accused me of being irresponsible. You've suggested I'm potentially influencing young actors in dangerous ways. But you can't even tell me what I supposedly said that has you so concerned. That's not journalism, mate. That's character assassination based on hearsay. The camera showed Stephanopoulos clearly uncomfortable now, his professional composure cracking like ice under pressure. I have the information right here in my notes, he said defensively, gesturing vaguely at his papers. Then read it, Hardy challenged, his voice cutting through the studio. Read me the exact quote that has you so worried about my influence on young actors. Go on. I'm waiting. Stephanopoulos fumbled with his papers, and you could see sweat beginning to form on his forehead, visible even under the studio makeup designed to prevent exactly that. The specific quote isn't as important as the overall pattern of statements you've made over time, he offered desperately. The specific quote isn't important. Hardy's voice rose slightly for the first time, carrying genuine incredulity. George, you just spent 5 minutes questioning my professional integrity based on something you claim I said, and now you're telling me the actual words don't matter? Do you understand how insane that sounds? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you brought me on this show under false pretenses, so you could ambush me with accusations you can't even properly articulate. Is that accurate? Because if not, please correct me. The tension in the studio was now absolutely palpable. Crew members in the background were exchanging worried glances. Camera operators seemed uncertain whether to keep filming or cut away. The audience sat in stunned silence, watching this surgical dismantling unfold. Stephanopoulos tried desperately to regain control, clearing his throat and attempting to steer back to safer ground. Tom, let's talk about your new film. The character you play deals with some heavy psychological themes. No, George, Hardy interrupted firmly. We're not done here. You just spent several minutes attacking my professional methods based on research you clearly haven't done. You owe your viewers an explanation. You owe me an explanation. I think we should move on. I think you should answer the question. You brought up these mental health advocates who are supposedly concerned about my influence. Name one. Give me a single name of someone who has specifically criticized my approach. Stephanopoulos shifted uncomfortably, his body language now screaming discomfort. Tom, there have been several articles. Several articles, Hardy cut in, but no names. No specific quotes. No actual criticism you can point to. He leaned forward slightly, his intensity increasing. George, do you realize what you're doing right now? You're doing exactly what you're accusing me of. You're potentially damaging someone's reputation based on vague, unsubstantiated claims. That's not the same thing at all, isn't it? You've just told millions of viewers that mental health advocates think I'm irresponsible. You've suggested that parents should be worried about my influence on young actors. But you can't provide a single piece of evidence to support any of that. Not one expert's name. Not one actual quote. Nothing. The camera captured Stephanopoulos looking increasingly flustered, his face reddening. We have producers who researched these topics thoroughly before. Your producers, Hardy interrupted, and there was something almost pitying in his tone now. George, let me ask you something. How long have you been in journalism? That's not relevant too. I think it's very relevant, because what you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's gossip. It's lazy, irresponsible reporting that gives actual journalists a bad name. And the worst part is you don't even seem to realize it. Stephanopoulos' face was getting redder. Tom, I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate being ambushed on live television by someone who couldn't be bothered to do basic fact-checking. But here we are. We invited you here as a guest. You invited me here under the pretense of discussing my work, then immediately launched into an attack based on information you can't even verify. That's not hosting, George. That's entrapment. The studio audience was completely silent now, riveted by this unprecedented confrontation. You could see people in the crew starting to look panicked, probably wondering if they should cut to commercial, if they should intervene somehow. Tom, I think you're overreacting, Stephanopoulos tried weakly. Overreacting? Hardy's voice got quieter, which somehow made it more menacing. George, you've just accused me of potentially harming young actors. You've suggested I'm irresponsible in my approach to mental health. You've implied that I'm a dangerous influence. And you did all of this without a single shred of actual evidence. How exactly would you like me to react? These are legitimate questions about celebrity responsibility. Based on what? Show me the study. Show me the expert opinion. Show me anything, literally anything other than your producer's interpretation of what someone might have said about something I might have done. Stephanopoulos looked down at his notes again, clearly stalling for time. The concerns have been raised in various media outlets. Various media outlets. Hardy echoed with devastating precision. George, do you hear yourself? You sound like a politician dodging a corruption scandal. Various sources say. People are concerned. It's been reported. These are weasel words, mate. This is how people talk when they're making things up. I'm not making anything up. Then prove it. Right now. On air. Show me one specific example of what you're talking about. The silence stretched on forever in television time. Stephanopoulos shuffled his papers, looked at the cameras, looked back at Hardy, looked anywhere but directly into those eyes that were boring into him with laser focus. Tom, I think we're spending too much time on this. We're spending exactly the right amount of time on this. You made serious accusations against my professional character, and now you're trying to run away when asked to back them up. That's not how this works. Nobody's running away from anything. Then stop deflecting and answer the question. One name, one specific quote, one piece of actual evidence for any of the claims you've made in the last 10 minutes. Stephanopoulos was visibly sweating now, the studio makeup no longer able to hide his discomfort. Tom, our research team compiled information from multiple sources. Your research team, Hardy said slowly, deliberately. Compiled information. George, that's not an answer. That's corporate speak for, we didn't actually verify anything. You're hiding behind your research team the same way you're hiding behind these anonymous critics and vague concerns. I'm not hiding behind anything. Then take responsibility. Either admit you don't have specific information to back up your accusations, or provide it. Stop trying to have it both ways. You could see Stephanopoulos looking off camera, clearly hoping for some kind of rescue from his producers. Tom, I think our viewers would prefer to hear about your new film. Our viewers deserve better than this, Hardy shot back immediately. They deserve hosts who do actual research, instead of ambushing guests with tabloid rumors. They deserve journalists who can back up their questions with facts instead of hiding behind weasel words and anonymous sources. You're being very aggressive here. I'm being precise. There's a difference. You came at me with serious accusations, and now you're upset that I'm asking you to back them up with actual evidence. That's not aggression, George. That's accountability. The camera showed the studio audience looking absolutely captivated but also deeply uncomfortable, like they were witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing. A breakdown of the carefully maintained illusion of morning television. Stephanopoulos made one more desperate attempt to regain control. Tom, let's try to have a productive conversation here. We could have had a productive conversation, Hardy interrupted, if you'd started with honest questions about my actual work instead of manufactured controversy designed to create a viral moment. But you chose this approach, George. You chose to ambush me with accusations you can't support. So let's see it through. Stephanopoulos, his professional composure now completely shattered, made one last attempt. Tom, I understand you're passionate about your work, but surely you can acknowledge that celebrities have a responsibility when they speak publicly about sensitive topics. Hardy stared at him for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice cut through the studio like a scalpel. Absolutely, George. Celebrities do have a responsibility. Just like journalists have a responsibility to their audience. Just like morning show hosts have a responsibility to prepare properly for their interviews. Just like network television has a responsibility to maintain some basic standards of integrity. I think we maintain very high standards here. Do you? Because right now your audience is watching you make accusations you can't support, ask questions based on research you haven't done, and dodge accountability when called out on it. Is that the high standard you're referring to? The camera caught Stephanopoulos' face, and you could see him starting to lose his composure completely, the professional mask cracking beyond repair. Tom, you're being incredibly difficult. Difficult? Hardy's voice rose with genuine incredulity. George, you ambushed me with false accusations on live television, and you think I'm being difficult for asking you to back them up with facts? What exactly did you expect would happen here? That I would just sit here and take it? I expected a professional conversation. Then, you should have conducted yourself professionally. You should have done your homework. You should have prepared actual questions instead of tabloid gotcha nonsense. Stephanopoulos looked around desperately, clearly hoping someone would cut to commercial or somehow end this nightmare. Tom, I think we need to wrap this up. Oh, now you want to wrap it up? Hardy's voice carried bitter amusement. After you've spent 10 minutes attacking my professional integrity based on nothing? After you've implied to millions of viewers that I'm a dangerous influence on young actors? Now you want to just move on? We have limited time. We had limited time when you decided to waste it on manufactured controversy instead of discussing my actual work. You made that choice, George. You decided this was how you wanted to spend our time together. The studio was dead silent except for the mechanical hum of cameras. You could see crew members frozen, completely unsure what to do. This has gone completely off the rails, Stephanopoulos said, his voice cracking slightly. Tom, I'm going to ask you one more time to please tone it down. Tone it down? Hardy's voice got quieter again, but somehow more intense. George, you just told me to tone it down on your show after you attacked my professional reputation with accusations you can't support. Do you understand how insulting that is? I'm just trying to have a civil conversation. Civil? Hardy let out a bitter laugh. There's nothing civil about ambushing a guest with unsubstantiated accusations. There's nothing civil about making claims you can't back up. There's nothing civil about trying to damage someone's reputation for ratings. Stephanopoulos was sweating heavily now, his professional mask completely destroyed. Tom, that's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Explain it to me. Explain to your viewers why you brought me here under false pretenses. Explain why you thought it was acceptable to make serious accusations without doing basic fact-checking. We're trying to ask important questions about celebrity influence. No. You're trying to create controversy where none exists. You're trying to manufacture drama for television ratings. And when called out on it, you're hiding behind vague concepts like celebrity responsibility and important questions. The camera showed Stephanopoulos looking completely defeated, but Hardy wasn't finished. George, let me ask you something. Do you have children? That's not relevant. I think it's very relevant. Do you have children who might see this interview? Children who might learn from watching how you conduct yourself professionally? Tom, please. Because if you do, what lesson do you think they're learning right now? That it's okay to make accusations without evidence? That it's acceptable to ambush people with lies and call it journalism? That when you're caught in your own negligence, you can just ask people to tone it down and move on? Stephanopoulos looked off camera again, clearly pleading with his producers to end this nightmare. Tom, I think we should take a break. A break? Hardy stood up slightly in his chair, his physical presence suddenly more imposing. George, you don't get to take a break from accountability. You don't get to make serious accusations against someone's character and then just walk away when asked to justify them. Security, Stephanopoulos called out, his voice cracking. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Security? Hardy's voice filled with absolute disbelief. You're calling security on me? For asking you to back up your own questions with facts? This is unbelievable. Security guards began moving toward the set, and Hardy shook his head in amazement. This is what modern journalism has become, he said, looking directly into the camera now, instead of at Stephanopoulos. When a journalist gets called out for shoddy research and unsubstantiated accusations, they call security instead of admitting their mistakes. Tom, you need to calm down, one of the security guards said as he approached. Calm down? Hardy looked at the guard, then back at Stephanopoulos. I'm sitting in my chair, speaking in complete sentences, asking for basic journalistic standards. What exactly do I need to calm down from? Stephanopoulos had completely lost control. Remove him from the set. On what grounds? Hardy asked, still seated calmly. For asking you to provide evidence for your accusations? For expecting you to do your job professionally? As security moved closer, Hardy stood up slowly, deliberately. This is remarkable, he said, his voice carrying throughout the studio. Absolutely remarkable. I came here to talk about my work, and I'm being removed from the set for expecting basic journalistic integrity. He looked directly into the camera one final time. Remember this moment. This is what happens when you ask for accountability in modern media. And with that, Tom Hardy walked off the set under his own power, leaving George Stephanopoulos sitting there looking shell-shocked, the studio audience in stunned silence, and television history made. The camera lingered on Stephanopoulos for several more seconds, showing him trying desperately to compose himself, shuffling his papers with hands that shook visibly, before finally cutting to what had to be an unplanned commercial break. But even as the red lights on the cameras went dark, the damage was complete and irreversible. What had just unfolded wasn't simply an uncomfortable celebrity interview or a moment of television tension that would be forgotten by next week. This was a complete and total dismantling of everything that morning show journalism had become: the lazy research, the manufactured controversies, the ambush tactics disguised as tough questioning, the corporate speak that replaced actual accountability. In the control room, producers were frantically debating whether to air the second half of the interview or cut Hardy's segment entirely. Phone lines were already lighting up with calls from network executives demanding explanations. Social media had exploded within seconds. Number Tom Hardy was trending worldwide before the commercial break had even ended, with clips of his systematic destruction of Stephanopoulos already being shared millions of times. Tom Hardy himself walked backstage with his head held high, his composure intact, despite the adrenaline surely coursing through his system. A production assistant approached him nervously, unsure whether to apologize or ask him to return to the set. Hardy simply nodded politely, collected his jacket, and made his way toward the exit. He had said everything that needed to be said. There was nothing left to add. His publicist was waiting in the green room, phone pressed to her ear, already fielding calls from entertainment media outlets desperate for comment. Hardy waved her off gently. No statements, no spin, no damage control. The truth had spoken for itself on live television. Anything he added now would only dilute the purity of what had just occurred. Back on set, as the commercial break stretched longer than scheduled, Stephanopoulos sat alone at the desk, the weight of what had just happened finally sinking in. He had walked into this interview thinking he would create a viral moment, and he had, just not in the way he'd imagined. He had wanted to be the hard-hitting journalist who didn't back down from celebrities. Instead, he had been exposed as exactly what Hardy had accused him of being: a morning show host playing at journalism, armed with nothing but gossip and producer, compiled talking points, unable to back up his own accusations with a single verifiable fact. When Good Morning America returned from commercial, Stephanopoulos was visibly shaken. His co-host tried valiantly to salvage the remainder of the broadcast, steering conversation toward lighter topics, but the energy was wrong. Everyone watching, both in the studio and at home, knew they had just witnessed something unprecedented. The carefully maintained illusion of morning television had been shattered, and no amount of cheerful banter about cooking segments or celebrity gossip could put it back together. Within hours, think pieces began appearing across media outlets. Some defended Stephanopoulos, arguing that celebrities needed to accept tough questioning as the price of fame, but far more condemned the interview as exactly what Hardy had called it: an ambush built on unsubstantiated claims, lazy research, and the kind of tabloid tactics that had no place in legitimate journalism. Media critics who had spent years complaining about the degradation of morning news saw Hardy's confrontation as a watershed moment, a celebrity finally saying publicly what they had been arguing privately for years. The interview became required viewing in journalism schools, used as a case study in what not to do. How not to prepare for an interview, how not to make accusations without evidence, how not to respond when called out on shoddy research. Students watched in fascination as Hardy systematically dismantled every defense Stephanopoulos attempted, exposing each evasion, each piece of corporate speak, each attempt to dodge accountability. For Tom Hardy, the incident became one more example of his unwillingness to play the Hollywood game, his refusal to smile through disrespect just to maintain his image. He had walked onto that set in good faith, prepared to discuss his work professionally and thoughtfully. When confronted with an ambush instead, he had done what he always did: responded with precision, honesty, and an unwavering commitment to truth over convenience. The confrontation raised uncomfortable questions that the entertainment media industry couldn't easily answer. How many other celebrities had sat through similar ambushes, smiling through accusations they couldn't respond to because they were too polite, too professional, or too concerned about their public image. How many interviews were conducted with this same level of lazy preparation, relying on gossip and hearsay instead of actual research? How much of morning television had become nothing more than manufactured controversy designed to generate viral moments rather than inform audiences? George Stephanopoulos eventually issued a statement through ABC, claiming that the interview had been a robust exchange of ideas and that he respected Hardy's passion for his craft. The statement carefully avoided acknowledging any of Hardy's specific criticisms: the lack of research, the inability to cite sources, the failure to back up accusations with evidence. It was exactly the kind of corporate non-apology that had defined the interview itself, and media observers noted the irony immediately. Tom Hardy never made another appearance on Good Morning America. His publicists made it quietly clear that while he remained willing to do press for his projects, interviews would need to be conducted with preparation, respect, and professional standards. Some outlets saw this as Hardy being difficult. Others recognized it as simply expecting the bare minimum of journalistic integrity. The viral clips of the confrontation continued circulating for weeks, months, even years afterward. New audiences discovered them constantly, shocked by Hardy's willingness to call out bad journalism so directly, inspired by his refusal to accept manufactured controversy as legitimate questioning. The interview became a touchstone moment, a reminder that accountability should flow in both directions, that celebrities being in the public eye doesn't give journalists license to abandon professional standards, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply ask someone to back up their accusations with facts. In the end, Tom Hardy had walked onto Good Morning America to promote a film. He left having done something far more important. He had held a mirror up to modern morning television and forced millions of viewers to see what it had become. Whether the industry learned anything from that mirror remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: no one who watched that interview would ever look at morning show tough questions quite the same way again. And that, perhaps, was the most important contribution Tom Hardy made that morning. Not defending his own reputation, but exposing the emptiness of the journalistic standards that had tried to attack it.